In the circus acts, known as freak shows, which originated in England during the 16th century, people with rare physical traits were exhibited as spectacles. At the time, deformities were often seen as signs of the supernatural or omens of disaster, fueling superstition and public anxiety. Showmen like P.T. Barnum exploited these beliefs, turning physical anomalies into profitable entertainment. These acts drew enormous crowds, captivated by people with extraordinary appearances or talents. Though undeniably exploitative, they became strange routes to fame and occasionally fortune. In this video, we explore 15 unforgettable figures and their stories. Let's begin with number 15, Miss Amelia Hill. Amelia was born around 1865. She built her reputation as one of the great fat ladies of the late 19th century. Likely a New Yorker, she sat often for Charles Eisenman's photo studio and appeared at Bowery venues like Bunnell's Museum. By 12, Amelia already weighed nearly 300 pounds, and by her 40s, she was 475 pounds at a height of only 4 feet, 9 inches. She toured with the Great London Circus, Barnum and London, and Four-Paw Cells, her travels reaching as far as New Orleans. In 1905, she pitched an act with fellow performer Mary Peters called the Fat Lady Boxing Act, complete with dancing and vaudeville flair. Amelia's letter requested $50 a week, a bold sum at the time. Her willingness to strip from dresses to bloomers for the boxing routine shows how performers adapted to survive, mixing burlesque with spectacle. Hill's story reflects both hardship and determination, a woman who turned her fat body into a livelihood. Number 14, the Ohio Fat Boy. R.J. James, aka the Ohio Fat Boy, hailed from Wayne County. By the 1880s, he weighed around 500 pounds, enough to earn his living as a sideshow attraction. James performed with Drew's Dime Museum in Cleveland, worked with the Sells Brothers Circus, and, given his Eisenman photos, almost certainly appeared in New York's Bowery Dime Museums. Audiences of the era paid eagerly to see such figures, yet today, men of his size walk freely in shopping malls, unnoticed. That contrast speaks volumes about how society's sense of oddity has changed. For James, his girth meant survival. In a time when poverty loomed, the chance to stand on stage and be stared at for coins was both degrading and necessary. He was one of many whose existence blurred entertainment and exploitation. The billing Ohio Fat Boy may sound cruel now, but it was the title that fed him. His life remains a quiet testament to sideshow history. Number 13, Stella the Bearded Lady. Betty McGregor was born in 1902 in Battle Creek, and she spent her youth hiding a secret. She shaved as many as 6 times a day to conceal the whiskers that grew steadily on her face. By her 30s, she stopped hiding and stepped onto the stage, adopting the name Stella the Bearded Lady. Joining Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, and later Ward Hall shows during World War II, she became a fixture in America's fading sideshow era. Unlike some performers, Betty began her adult life in respectable work as a teacher and nurse, but the grind of constant shaving eventually forced her to choose another path. On stage, she was bold, turning shame into spectacle, drawing stares not with pity, but curiosity. When sideshows declined in the 1970s, she left performance quietly, living the rest of her life disguised as a man, working as an accountant. Betty McGregor died in 1977, remembered as one of the last true bearded ladies. Number 12, the world's largest moose. Happy. Jack Eckhart, born in 1874 in Fort Wayne, Indiana, weighed 19 pounds at birth and never stopped growing. By 10, he was already 265 pounds and performing for P.T. Barnum. Over the next 50 years, he billed himself as the world's largest moose, or elk, cleverly linking his act to fraternal lodges that filled America. At his heaviest, Jack weighed 739 pounds. Unlike many performers his size, he lived into his 60s, a rarity in the business. He was a showman to the core, sometimes posing nearly nude in Greco-Roman style, unashamed of his body and unafraid of the gawking eyes. Jack toured the country with circuses and sideshows, his smiling demeanor hiding the toll of carrying such weight. In 1937, after decades in the business, his life ended not from illness, but from a truck accident that crushed his car. He was buried in a casket 6 times larger than normal, a final display for a giant showman. Number 11. Grace Gilbert. Grace, born in Ohio in 1876, grew into one of the most striking bearded ladies of her era. By 18, she was already performing, and by 1901, her beard reached 18 inches, far longer than any rival. She worked with Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, Hagenbeck Wallace, and McCadden circuses, her presence unforgettable on every stage. Grace wasn't delicate, she was tough. Known for doing heavy labor alongside circus roustabouts, she carried herself like one of the men. When she married in 1910, stories spread that the minister mistook her for the groom, a tale that may have been carny hype, but stuck nonetheless. For a time, she bleached her beard and was billed as the girl with the golden whiskers, though the upkeep wore her down. After marrying, she tried to retire, but by 1916 she was back at Coney Island, working steadily until her death in 1924. Grace's life was grit and spectacle, lived with strength few could match. Number 10. The Kentucky Giant Fat Boy. John Hanson Craig was born in Iowa City in 1855 and weighed an astonishing 206 pounds by age 2, winning Barnum's Bonnie Baby contest. His family later moved to Kentucky, where Craig grew into one of the heaviest men of his time, reportedly over 900 pounds. Like many in his category, he lived knowing his years would be short. Still, he made the most of them, performing with P.T. Barnum and Adam Forepaugh, exhibiting himself at circuses and museums, and even running one of his own. Craig's first wife, Mary Jane Kessler, was also a fat performer, said to weigh nearly 800 pounds. After her death in 1882, he remarried snake charmer Zella Ayres, with whom he had a child in 1890. Craig suffered from diabetes and died in 1894 at just 39, his size overwhelming his health. His life, like others in his profession, was one of spectacle and fragility, fame on borrowed time, with love and loss woven through. But this guy was good. Number 9. Laurette Fulkerson, the last tattooed lady. By the 1930s, tattoos on women were still shocking. Laurette Fulkerson, born Loretta Love in 1915, leaned into that shock, turning her body into a spectacle. 90% of her skin was inked, making her one of the most tattooed women of her era. She worked with Ringling Brothers, Hubert's Museum, and Hall and Christ, traveling through America's sideshow circuit for decades. Banner paintings promised audiences a glimpse of her intricate designs, which she displayed proudly under the title, The Tattooed Lady. Laurette wasn't a rebel chasing subculture trends. Her tattoos were her career, her livelihood. Unlike many performers, she stayed with the trade until the early 1990s, when sideshows faded and tattooed bodies no longer shocked crowds. Often called the last tattooed lady, her career marked the end of an era where ink itself could draw a paying audience. She died in 2007 at 92, remembered as both a survivor of sideshow history and its final tattooed star. All right, guys, now let's head over to Number 8, the Sacred Hairy Family of Burma. In Barnum's late 1800s shows, crowds gasped at the sight of a Burmese family cloaked in thick fur from head to toe. This wasn't a costume, it was hypertrichosis, carried through their bloodline since She Maung, born in 1796. At age 5, She Maung was gifted to the king of Ava, treated as a court jester yet respected enough to marry. His children inherited the condition, including his daughter Mafoon, and soon the Hairy family became legend. When revolution tore Burma apart in 1885, they fled their burning palace, surviving in the jungle before escaping to England. There, naturalists described them as refined, intelligent, and kind, so different from the wild image painted on circus banners. By 1888, they toured with P.T. Barnum across America, billed as the Sacred Hairy Family of Burma. And then, without warning, they vanished from public record. Their disappearance left a mystery, a family remembered not for tricks or cruelty, but for an inherited strangeness that made them unforgettable. Number 7. The Human Fountain. Haji Ali stood before his audience, drank gallons of water, and moments later unleashed it in controlled streams, as if his stomach had become a living pump. Born in Egypt, he became world famous for an act equal parts fascinating and disturbing. His most famous routine involved swallowing kerosene, spitting fire across the stage, then extinguishing the flames with jets of water expelled on command. He even swallowed live goldfish, only to bring them back unharmed, swimming and wriggling in the basin. No sleight of hand, no stage gimmicks, just an unnatural command over his body. Crowds were awestruck, scientists puzzled, and skeptics silenced. He wasn't a magician. He was a man who turned the private functions of the body into public spectacle. Haji Ali left behind an act that bordered on the grotesque, yet it wasn't cruelty, it was mastery. To this day, no performer has truly matched the unsettling marvel of the human fountain. Number 6. The Human Unicorn. One photograph was all it took. A Chinese villager named Wang stood still, a rough keratin horn curling out of his scalp like something from myth. Nearly 14 inches long, spiraled and jagged, the growth gave him the title, the Human Unicorn. Doctors later explained it as a rare cutaneous horn, but newspapers of the early 1900s made him a legend. His face appeared in pamphlets and tabloids across Europe and America, often with illustrations that exaggerated his horn into grotesque fantasy. Sometimes he was dressed plainly, a peasant in robes, other times adorned with feathers, cast as exotic and mystical. Wang himself left few words behind. He never joined big circuses, never toured the way others did. Yet his image became unforgettable, a symbol of the strange and surreal. Whether seen as a medical marvel or a myth, he was a legend. Number 5. The Ape Woman. Julia was born in Mexico in 1834, and it was not a good time. She became known worldwide as the Ape Woman. She lived with hypertrichosis, a condition that caused thick black hair to cover her body, and gingival hyperplasia, which enlarged her gums and distorted her face. These traits led promoters to cruelly market her as half-woman, half-beast. Yet Julia was more than an exhibit. She performed with grace, singing and dancing on stages across Europe and America, even appearing on Broadway. Audiences, though shocked by her appearance, were captivated by her talent. Her husband and manager, Theodore Lent, exploited her relentlessly, profiting from her condition. In 1860, Julia gave birth to a son who shared her disorder. Both he and Julia died soon after. Tragically, her embalmed body continued touring Europe for over a century. Only in 1972 was she finally returned to Mexico for burial. Julia Pastrana's life remains a symbol of exploitation, resilience, and humanity beneath layers of cruelty, spectacle, and fun. Number 4. The Owl Head. When Martin Joe Lorello twisted his neck, gasps filled the tent. Born in Germany in 1885, he lived with a spinal condition that let him turn his head a full 180 degrees. his spine bent into a grotesque curve, his face looking backward while his body faced forward, an image that haunted anyone who saw it. Moving to the U.S. in 1921, he worked with Ripley's Believe It or Not, Barnum and Bailey, and Ringling Brothers. He also trained dogs, blending strange comedy with shock. Drinking water while his head faced backward left audiences stunned, equal parts amazed and horrified. Laurello's act took a toll. Breathing became difficult, yet he kept performing through the 1930s, appearing in Ripley's museums nationwide. By the time of his death from a heart attack in 1955, he was remembered as the human owl. Pain shaped his life. But in the circus ring, that pain became one of the most unforgettable acts ever staged. Now, let's move to number 3. The Invulnerable Man. Imagine a man stepping calmly onto the stage, a steel sword driven straight through his body, no blood, agony, or collapse. That was Miran Dejo. Born in 1912, he became one of the greatest medical enigmas of the 20th century. In the 1940s, doctors witnessed him endure skewers and rods thrust clean through his chest, even capturing X-rays that proved the weapons pierced organs. Audiences thought it must be an illusion, but scientists confirmed it wasn't. No trick could explain a man impaled and still speaking calmly to the crowd. Dejo called his ability a spiritual gift, saying he was meant to show that the human body could endure far more than believed. Whether biology, faith, or something else, no one ever found an answer. He died in 1948 after swallowing a steel needle for an experiment. Miran Dejo's performances weren't magic. They were a challenge to science itself, leaving even hardened skeptics staring in disbelief. Number 2. The Smallest Woman in the World. Pauline Musters, known worldwide as Princess Pauline, stood only 58 centimeters tall and weighed less than 4 kilograms. Yet when she stepped onto a stage in the 1890s, her presence filled the entire room. Born in the Netherlands in 1876, she carried herself with wit, elegance, and a confidence that stunned audiences who expected fragility. Pauline danced, sang, and carried on conversations with charm that made skeptics forget her size entirely. Vaudeville halls and circuses from Europe to America embraced her, not as a curiosity to be pitied, but as a performer who lit up the boards. Even hardened press critics admitted she wasn't a gimmick. She was a talent. Her fame soared, but her life burned short. In 1895, while performing in New York, she succumbed to pneumonia and meningitis at only 19. Pauline's body was tiny, but her legacy was immense. She proved that greatness wasn't measured in height. Number 1. Edward Mordache. Edward Mordache, born into British nobility in the 19th century, lived under the torment of one of medical history's most haunting cases. Behind his normal face grew another, an additional visage fused into the back of his head. Unlike a simple growth, it appeared disturbingly aware. According to legend, it whispered obscenities at night, mocking Edward and driving him into despair. Terrified, he begged surgeons to remove it, but none dared attempt the operation, fearing it would kill him. Mystics promised cures, but offered only false hope. Isolated and psychologically shattered, Edward could no longer endure the torment. In his 20s, he ended his own life. Though scholars debate fact versus folklore, the story persists as one of anatomy's darkest legends. Equal parts tragedy and horror, it captures how deformity, myth, and human suffering become inseparable. Beneath the legend was still a man, fragile, anguished, and deserving of empathy, remembered less for his wealth than his unbearable burden. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.